Crips even came to kill me and DJ Quik at a funeral in Inglewood. The Compton Crips and the Compton Pyrus were not playing.
If you were rolling with the Bloods or the Crips back then, you were basically a walking target for drama, and the streets were spinning out of control. Even famous faces couldn't escape the madness.
They pulled up to me and Crawford, and they thought Crawford, High C, was Quik. Wasn't. They moved a little bit to the side, and then other cars were coming through. Everybody in the church was running out.
Enter DJ Quik, a man who didn't just stare death in the eyes, but found himself tangled in some of Compton's deadliest gang wars when bodies were dropping nonstop. The city was like a battlefield. His longtime manager, Stan Shepard, later shocked fans by revealing just how close hip-hop was to losing DJ Quik forever, a moment that proves just how dangerous that world really was. It all went down at a funeral, a place that's supposed to be about mourning, respect, and peace. Instead, it turned into the backdrop for an attempted hit on DJ Quik's life. According to Stan, a group of Crips showed up disguised as ordinary funeral guests, blending in like they were just part of the crowd. But their real mission was way darker. They came ready to take him and DJ Quik out on the spot. Stan didn't sugarcoat it either. He said straight up, "The Crips came to kill me and DJ Quik at a funeral." Here's the wild part. Rapper High C was right there with them, and at first the shooters actually mistook him for DJ Quik. But once they realized it wasn't Quik, everything went off the rails. Gunfire exploded in the middle of the funeral, and instead of targeting just Quik, the attackers sprayed bullets at innocent people who were only there to pay their respects.
To me, that I had to redirect my life. I got paranoid. I was completely paranoid. Every time I would leave anywhere, it destroyed.
Total panic broke out. People were screaming, running for cover, while shots ripped through a place meant for mourning and silence. But the most heartbreaking moment was when Quik's girlfriend at the time was killed in the chaos. That tragedy shattered him in a way that never healed. Stan revealed it, left scars carved deep into Quik's mind, so deep that he developed PTSD, haunted by nightmares and living in a constant state of paranoia. Even Stan himself carried that trauma from the attack. That moment became a turning point. Quik admitted it shook him to his very core. Living with constant paranoia in a world drowning in death and violence changed him forever. He could never go back to being the same person again. Stan made it clear just how deadly things were at that time. He explained that Compton's gang politics were cold-blooded and unforgiving. In his own words, the Compton Bloods and Crips were not playing at all. And when Stan said not playing, he meant it. Back then, it didn't take much for someone to end up dead. Stan even revealed something chilling. People would walk right up to him and casually offer to handle anyone he had beef with, all for just $500.
These people will kill you, and it doesn't take much.
That was the street price for a human life back then, and it shows just how cheap, casual, and cold-blooded things had gotten. But to really understand how a funeral could explode into a full-on bloodbath, you gotta look at Compton itself, the city that bred this chaos and shaped every move that went down. See, Compton wasn't always the hardcore battlefield people picture today. Back in the 1950s, it was calm, quiet, and mostly white. More farmland and backyard vibes than street corners and chaos.
$500. They asked me for $500 to kill somebody.
Families were raising kids, and one of the city's founders, Griffith Dickinson Compton, even carved out Richland farms so agriculture would always be part of the neighborhood. But history flipped the script. The shift kicked in with white flight, when white families packed up and left as more black families moved in. Many of them pushed out of other parts of Los Angeles by brutal housing discrimination. By the late 1960s, Compton had transformed completely. The Watts Rebellion in 1965, just a few miles away, was like the final nail in the coffin. From that point on, Compton's entire vibe shifted. The calm farmland dream was dead, replaced by a hardened reality where gangs, poverty, and raw street survival became everyday life. By the time the 1980s hit, Compton had built a reputation so dark it couldn't be ignored. It was branded the murder capital of the United States.
The bystanders, the people caught in the crossfire.
Oh man, it ain't nobody gonna bring her back.
And this wasn't just some catchy nickname people tossed around. It was backed by cold, brutal statistics. The numbers told the story, and that story was blood on the pavement. In 1990 alone, the murder rate skyrocketed to nearly 9,100 for every 100,000 residents. South Central LA was no joke, but Compton? That was a whole different beast. Mob James put it plain and raw. Back then, people were dropping like flies on all sides, and he was getting death threats nonstop. The streets had no mercy.
Why are you guys Bloods? Why are you in the gangs?
Why's we in the gang? I guess because the area we grew up in, man. Everybody go in that area, man. Everybody follow.
And the wildest part? The danger didn't just stick to gang members. Everyday folks were living under the same shadow. You could be a school teacher, a kid, a mother. It didn't matter one bit. Everyone was a target because drive-bys didn't care who they hit, and stray bullets weren't checking names or gang sets. Turf wars ripped right through normal life, turning the city into a constant battlefield. Kids couldn't even just be kids anymore. Playing outside meant hearing gunshots echo through the neighborhood, and mothers went to sleep terrified they might wake up to bury their sons the next day. That was the heavy cloud hanging over the entire city. Then came the crack epidemic in the early 80s, and that turned bad into catastrophic. Figures like Freeway Rick Ross flooded the neighborhoods with crack, and overnight gangs stopped being just cliques fighting for respect. They transformed into full-blown drug empires. Suddenly, money was pouring in, and with that cash came serious firepower. We're not talking little pistols either. They were stockpiling MAC-10s, Uzis, AKs. The firepower was insane, and the violence skyrocketed with it. And if that wasn't enough, the very people who were supposed to protect the streets, the Compton Police Department, had a reputation of their own, and it wasn't a good one.
And sister killed because the boy wore the wrong color hat. A drive-by shooting in Stockton. The victim.
People in the streets feared the jump-out boys. Cops who would pull up out of nowhere and harass residents without a second thought. But the corruption inside the force ran so deep that by 2000, the entire Compton Police Department was shut down and replaced by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. That alone shows just how broken the system really was. Sure, there were efforts to calm things down, like the Gifts for Guns program that collected thousands of weapons off the streets. But let's be real. In the bigger picture, it was like slapping a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. The violence kept raging, and at the heart of it all were the gangs, the Bloods and the Crips. Two colors that completely redefined Compton, turning red and blue into symbols of life or death. The roots of it all trace back to the early 70s, around 1971 in Los Angeles, when the Crips were born under figures like Raymond Washington and Stanley Tookie Williams.
Tupac Shakur is dead at the age of 25, just about a week after sustaining 4 bullet wounds last Saturday.
At first, they pitched it as protection, a brotherhood for the streets. But that promise of safety twisted fast into domination, with Tookie himself ruling through pure fear and intimidation. The Bloods came next, not as a branch of the Crips, but as straight-up defense. The Piru Street Boys rose up because they were sick of being pushed around and brutalized by Crip aggression. They had no choice but to fight back. Once those lines were drawn, red and blue stopped being just colors. They became flags, warnings, life or death markers. Wearing the wrong shade in the wrong neighborhood was like signing your own death certificate. And the wildest part? It wasn't just gang members who had to watch their backs. Even regular civilians could get caught slipping, just for something as simple as a red jacket or a blue cap. And it didn't stop at clothes. Even music could get you killed. Mob James told it best. One day he was cruising down Rosecrans and Central, deep in Crip territory, in his Cadillac. He had DJ Quik blasting, and since Quik was tied to the Bloods, that single song was enough to brand James as an enemy. Shots went flying just because of what was playing through his speakers. But right in the middle of all that endless bloodshed, there came a moment when peace actually seemed real.
Emmy-nominated rapper Nipsey Hussle shot and killed outside his...
It was called the Watts Truce, of 1992. And it happened just days before the whole city erupted during the Rodney King riots. Gangs like the Bounty Hunters, Grape Street Watts, Hacienda Village, and P.J. Watts came together inside a Muslim mosque and signed a literal treaty. And this wasn't just some casual handshake on the block. They modeled it after the Israel-Egypt armistice. For a moment, it really felt like the tide was turning. And it worked too, at least for a while. The following year, gang-related deaths in LA dropped by 10%. That might not sound massive, but in a city that hadn't seen a drop in violence since 1984, it was historic. They even held unity picnics where rival sets actually came together, eating, laughing, and for once the community felt like it was healing. Mothers could breathe a little easier, and kids could finally play without constant fear hanging over their heads. It was a real glimmer of hope, but sadly, it didn't last. The problems ran way deeper than just red versus blue. Broken promises, poverty, nonstop police harassment, and economic struggle kept eating away at the fragile peace. The hate was too old, too deep, too ingrained in the streets, and little by little, that brief light started to fade.
Dad, when I was like maybe 4 years old, he taught me how to make a paper airplane.
Within months, the streets slid right back into red versus blue, bullets flying, funerals stacking, and the war started claiming more than just nameless soldiers. It began swallowing the biggest names in hip-hop. Tupac Shakur's death in 1996 shook the entire world, but at the core, it still tied back to that same blood versus Crip conflict. Tupac, Suge Knight, and Death Row were connected with the mob Peru Bloods out of Compton. And then came the infamous MGM Grand fight with Orlando Anderson, a Southside Crip. That beatdown lit the fuse, and the Crips came for Tupac. The Vegas drive-by ended it all. Fast forward decades later, and the same story hit again with Nipsey Hussle. In 2019, Nipsey, a respected voice and a Crip, was tragically gunned down outside his own store by another Crip.
In vinyl, you kind of had to have innate sense of rhythm to do that. I could put on 2 records and blend a 3rd record with it, you know what I'm saying, or overdub cassette with it and have.
Nipsey's murder sparked another round of peace talks, a fresh push for unity in the streets. But even as the years roll on, the tug of war between peace and war has never really disappeared. And circling back to DJ Quik, the world he got caught up in was already insane. But truth is, his childhood wasn't much easier. Quik was born January 18th, 1970, right in Compton, California. He grew up on the west side, 436 West Spruce Street, dead in the middle of gang territory.
I'm 17, homeless. At this point, I'm just kind of going from apartment to apartment. I needed an address. That was the worst time of my life, actually.
By then, Compton had already become a breeding ground for Bloods and Crips, so it was almost inevitable the streets pulled him in. He ended up affiliating with the Treetop Piru, sometimes called Treetop Bompton Piru, or the West Side Trees, a blood set based in the northern part of Compton, just south of Rosecrans. Living in their stronghold shaped his whole identity, and later, it would pour straight into his music. Home life wasn't much softer either. Quik was the youngest of 10 kids, and his father dipped out when he was really young. He only ever saw him once in his entire life. That absence from his father weighed heavy on Quik, but he did find one thing that gave him light: music. For his 8th grade graduation, someone gifted him a turntable, and that single moment lit the spark. From there, he started spinning records, experimenting with sounds, and little by little, his passion grew into his purpose. But life wasn't done testing him. By the time he was 16, his family's house was foreclosed. His mother moved out to Louisiana, but Quik refused to leave Compton. That decision left him homeless for nearly 3 years. Yet even in the darkest times, music was the thing that kept him alive. It was during this grind that he officially claimed the name DJ Quik. And the spelling wasn't just for style. He purposely dropped the C to show his blood affiliation. Even with the missing letter, the CK in Quik still stood for Crip Killer.
He ain't in you. And I slid the pencil across the bottom of it, and I got up and walked away from the table.
Normally, a move like that could have stirred up serious problems. But Quik's raw talent was so undeniable that people let it slide. Both the streets and the music scene were rocking with him because they saw what he was bringing to the game. By 1987, Quik was carving his name deep into Compton. He hustled by selling homemade mixtapes around the neighborhood, and one in particular, the Red Tape, started locking him in a loyal fan base. People were paying attention, and by the late 80s, his grind finally paid off when Profile Records came through in 1990 and put a deal on the table. That deal marked the official launch of DJ Quik's professional career, but here's the wild twist. Eazy-E had his eye on Quik too. He tried to snatch him up for Ruthless Records with a massive $1 million advance. The problem? Quik had already locked in with Profile, and it turned into drama quick. Profile even hit Ruthless with a cease and desist just to keep Quik tied to their roster. Later, Quik admitted that linking with Profile was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, it lit the fuse for his career, but on the other, the label kept playing with his pockets, constantly shorting him on money he had already earned, forcing him to fight for what was rightfully his. Even with all the label drama, Quik made his mark fast. His debut album, Quik Is the Name, went crazy. Tracks like Tonight and Born and Raised in Compton shot him up the charts, hitting number 10 and eventually going platinum. But while his music career was blowing up, his gang ties and fiery temper kept dragging him right back into the streets. In 1991, he had one of the most infamous performances of his career in Denver, Colorado, at the Event Center on East Colfax Avenue, a strip already known for heavy gang activity, especially from the Trey Crips and other local sets. That night, the Crips rolled in deep, buying tickets and packing the venue. Once Quik hit the stage, they started taunting him. Instead of brushing it off, he clapped back, throwing up blood signs while performing Tonight. Then he turned it up another notch, flipping one of his lyrics from "F it, let's shoot some crabs" to "F it, let's shoot some Crips." That lit the fuse, and chaos exploded when someone from Quik's crew started hurling 40-ounce bottles into the crowd. One bottle smacked a Crip straight in the face, and another cracked a random fan in the jaw. Quik wasn't backing down either. He even poured his drink on some of the gang members in the crowd. That was the breaking point. The whole place exploded into a full-on brawl. Crips stormed the stage, and Quik and his crew had to literally run for their lives. 2 hours later, Denver police tracked him down at his hotel in Stapleton and hit him with a misdemeanor assault charge. But the drama didn't stop there. Quik was also neck-deep in one of the West Coast's most legendary rap beefs, going head-to-head with MC8 from Compton's Most Wanted. That tension actually stretched way back to 1987, when Quik dropped the Red Tape. On the track, Real Dough, he slipped in a line that fans swore was aimed right at CMW. At first, it wasn't even direct beef. Quik wasn't big enough yet. But once his mixtape started moving around, that slick line caught attention, and MC8 wasn't about to let it slide. By June 1990, CMW dropped their debut album, It's a Compton Thing. Track 7, Duck Sick, was a straight-up clapback at Quik, with 8 basically warning him not to play hero for the Bloods by throwing shade at the Crips on wax. From that moment, the beef was official. Shots kept flying back and forth for years, but the boiling point came when Quik dropped his diss track Dollars Plus Cents. That record hit 8 with one of the most savage, unforgettable lines in battle rap history, the kind that stamped their feud into hip-hop legend. "Tell me why you act so scary, giving your set a bad name with your misspelled name, 8. Now should I continue? Yeah, you left out the G 'cause G ain't in you." That was Quik's dagger. And even he admitted later that when he wrote that bar, he knew it was basically game over. But things didn't just stay on wax. The feud spilled into the streets. At a death row after-party, tensions between both camps snapped and a fight broke out. In the chaos, Kelly Jamerson from the Rollin' 60s Crips lost his life. By the summer of 1995, the beef was still burning hot, with no signs of slowing down. Then came the Source Awards on August 3rd, 1995, at the Paramount Theater in New York City. That night was already legendary, thanks to Suge Knight's infamous speech that threw gasoline on the East Coast versus West Coast fire. But for Quik and 8, it turned into another battlefield. Quik hit the stage, and with 8 sitting right there in the crowd, performed dollars plus cents directly in his face, and Quik didn't stop there. He piled on extra disses before and after the track just to twist the knife even deeper. 8 didn't react that night, but not because he wasn't heated. He was outnumbered. Suge Knight and the entire Death Row Army were in the building, and 8 knew if he escalated, he might not make it out alive. But time has a strange way of shifting things. After the devastating losses of Tupac and Biggie, even the deadliest rivalries started to look small compared to the bigger picture. Eventually, Quik and 8 buried the hatchet. And in one of the most unexpected full-circle moments in West Coast rap, Quik and Problem dropped their collab album Rosecrans in 2017. And guess who popped up on 2 tracks? MC8 himself. Hearing them side by side on Central Avenue and Funny How No One's Gone Change Things shocked fans, but it also felt right. It proved that no matter how deep the beef runs, time really can heal wounds. So, what do you think about DJ Quik's wild journey from chaos to redemption? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next deep dive.